Paprika. Where does it come from? A lot of people are not aware of the fact that paprika was completely unknown in countries like Hungary and Spain until only a few hundred years ago. In fact, chilies and all the derivatives of chili were not known outside of the Americas 500 years ago. Just imagine, 500 years ago, not one single chili consumed in India, not a single chili consumed in China, no chilies in Thai cuisine. And that's because chilies weren't known to the rest of the world until the Spaniards bumped into the Americas. Of course, as we know, Columbus was sailing to the Indonesian archipelago and he was travelling west to try and find a faster way, and in the process bumped into the Americas. And of course, the rest is history. Now, what was very interesting about chili plants was that, first of all, they were very easy to grow. The other thing is that chili plants hybridize very readily depending upon the different soil and climatic conditions that they're growing under. And so the chilies that were taken to Northern Europe tended to develop larger pods, and the active ingredient that gives chili its heat, a substance called capsaicin, tended to occur in lower quantities in these ones growing in Northern Europe. So much so that the people in those areas liked the beautiful sweet flavour of the now what are referred to as paprika pods, directly derived from chili, and continued to cultivate those. And that is essentially what has given us the sweet paprikas of Northern Europe. You'll also find paprika in Spain, but it has a slightly different flavour profile to the one that is very well known from Hungary. It generally tends to be accepted that the best paprika in the world is the Hungarian sweet paprika. And what happens with the paprika pods is that they are harvested. Interestingly enough, in Hungary, most of the farms are relatively small. There's not a lot of enormous broadacre monoculture, and many of these individual farmers, who may have farms as small as anything between 5 and 30 acres, will harvest the paprika pods, and then they will go into a paprika processing facility. The first thing that happens with these pods is that they are either put into crates or they are hung up. Traditionally, they used to be hung in these beautiful ristras, which were tied together and hung in a spot where they wouldn't be exposed to the weather, but would get enough air circulating around them to begin a very gradual drying process. These days, they tend to be put into woven sacks that are a little bit like an orange sack, so it can still breathe. This is a very important stage because during this approximate 2-week period, what happens is that the paprika pod loses a little bit of moisture, but also the capsaicin content. Now, this is what gives paprika its colour. The capsaicin content actually increases. Then, after this period, the paprika pods are washed, they're chopped up, usually in some sort of mill that will chop them up fairly finely. They then go through a dehydration process where they are gradually dried out, and then when they're dry, they're sieved to remove the pieces of stem and stalk that would still be remaining. And then the pods and the seeds that were in the pods are ground to a beautiful fine red powder. This grinding process is actually quite complex because it has to be done very carefully, and it has to be done in such a way that it actually enhances the flavour rather than taking away from it. The two main forms that are used are the traditional stone mill, which tends to produce the best quality, or the other process is a roller mill. And with a roller mill, the paprika spice goes in between two big rollers, and that's what crushes it up. And with this milling, it actually happens about 6 times before the paprika is finally ground. So the paprika will go through one mill, and then it will go through the next mill, and then it will go through the next mill, and this goes through 6 different mills. And at the end of the milling process, you have a powder that is beautifully fine, very sweet, and the two main grades of paprika are the ones that are sweet and the ones that are hot. Now, a hot paprika is still not all that hot when compared to a chili, but it does have a little bit of heat level to it. You can always tell a really good sweet paprika if you take a little pinch of it, put it on the tip of your tongue and taste it. If you detect a slight bitterness there, then it's very possible that it's not the true Hungarian paprika, and it may be one that's been grown in Spain or Africa, somewhere in the Americas, or even from China. A lot of these paprikas are still very good, and they have their uses because that slightly bitter flavour will go very well with other spices such as cumin, cloves, cardamom, allspice, if you're making something like a Moroccan dish. But for most European recipes, and it's specific for any sort of Hungarian recipes, you should always use the Hungarian sweet paprika, and you will find that will give you the very, very best result. The wonderful thing also about paprika is that it grows in a region of Hungary where paprika is just a major part of the economy. And this is in an area called Kolachar, and also further south from Budapest there's another place called Szeged where paprika is grown. And it's a very integral part of the community, so much so that they even have a paprika festival in September each year, and that is also a very interesting thing to visit if you ever get the chance to be in Hungary at that time of year. So when you're cooking with paprika, remember, if you're using delicate flavours, if you are using the paprika with, say, chicken or fish, and you're using quite a lot of it and you want a lovely delicate flavour, then be sure to use the Hungarian sweet. The Spanish we tend to use in stronger dishes, and also quite interestingly, the only people who produce a smoked paprika are the Spanish. The Hungarians don't produce any smoked paprika. Theirs is always just a sweet paprika or a hot paprika. The smoked paprikas are made by smoking the paprika pods as part of the drying and curing process. And a smoked paprika is quite strong in flavour, and if you ever have that, you should also always use considerably less than you would use of a normal sweet paprika. So keep an eye out for paprika next time you're shopping, and use it quite liberally in cooking because it does give a beautiful flavour. If you have any questions about paprika or any other spices, please don't hesitate to contact us at Herbie Spices.